shoot. Hey guys. Kind of came out of nowhere with this one, huh? I promise it all makes sense here soon. I'm doing an AMA on a Discord that I'm about to join in here called the Calliopean Club.
Welcome, let's read.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me? Oh wait, I might still have push to talk on. Oh, oops, sorry, I had push to talk on there.
We'll start in like about 5-10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, no worries. I am also live streaming here, so
Cool. Do you wanna post the link
yeah,
and make a discussion?
sure. Let's see. How on
We're
the...
also gonna be recording for our YouTube channel as well.
Okay, cool. This is weird. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh yeah, should I put that in the AMA discussion?
Yeah, right above the stream.
Cool. Cool, cool. Sweet. But just talking to my chat here right now, I just want to let them know that it might not be as involved with them for the first while the AMA goes on, but then later we're going to be reading some spooky stories to kind of follow up with that, since we got video coming out tomorrow. Cody Bryant just had McDonald's. That's exciting.
That's very exciting.
Okay, applicants should be able to join now. I think I got it.
Cool.
Thank
I'm
you.
seeing them join now, so.
I'm watching your chat. I love seeing how
Yeah, they're pretty thirsty, chat. But yeah, normally what I do on my live streams is I'll just record live stream my process of recording and just chat with them while I do that, just to it's kind of a fun way to be involved with the community there. And they control me all the way through.
have you ever done it before?
An AMA. Mainly they just kind of like while I'm like streaming and stuff, they'll just ask me a bunch of questions and stuff. And
So like impromptu. Eh?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Okie dokie.
Um, alright, so thank you for coming to our server. Um, for those of you who are watching his live stream, we're Calliopean Club. We are a intellectual server where we practice civility and education. Let's Read has been more than kind to come to our server, agree to answer a few questions, and yeah, let's just get right to it. Chanel wants to know what inspired you to do what you do.
Yeah, so I suppose the first inspiration that I got to try YouTube was my kind of observing my roommates doing YouTube. They had done a lot of comedy stuff throughout college, and I had, you'd always kind of like heard of people doing YouTube channels. You kind of, I'm sure, like back whenever I first started, I started back in 2014, but like before that was, I guess, like peak peak PewDiePie time and all that kind of stuff, and basically characters like him and just the kind of concept of YouTube seemed so illustrious to me, and the fact that I just really wanted to do something creative, but also have the potentiality to like have a lot of success with it at the same time, and hearing that people at that time were starting to make it their like full-time jobs, I was like, I feel like I really got to get into that. So yeah, basically, after I had moved in with my roommates currently and kind of had made quite a few like short comedic films with them, they had kind of just shown me the ropes as far as like how to like edit videos and audio and thumbnails and uploading to YouTube and that whole process and getting set up. And I didn't really know exactly what I was going to get into per se, but I had some experience being, the sound guy for various productions at my college for friends that had gone to the film school there. And so that just kind of inspired me to maybe kind of try, some narrations, because I had thought like not a lot of people read stories on YouTube, but then I was led to find the sort of creepypasta community or the horror narration community, and once I found that, I was like, wow, that's a large pool of individuals are interested in that kind of like niche, concepts of narration. So I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna kind of go in that direction. So I suppose in kind of a nutshell, that's like what sort of led me to where I am now.
Is horror your personal favorite, or do you like any other fiction that isn't horror?
Initially when I started my channel, I was very much into narrating like science fiction, and that was kind of like the inspiration for my avatar that I use today. That's like the spaceman slash skeleton, like the space skeleton guy, because it was sort of a mix between horror and science fiction together. Once I had stumbled kind of across a 70s sci-fi Tumblr page that was devoted to that, and so that was initially I was very much more into science fiction, and I had read quite a few like classics and stuff. And it was actually when I first started the channel, I was reading through most of the Dune, like Spice Planet series and the chapters in there. And but it wasn't until I kind of found my niche with like creepypastas and started to understand more about copyright that I realized that it's probably not smart to stick to like science fiction, because the majority of science fiction kind of exists within the realm of like professional writers, I guess you could say. And so then because of so many people were into like creepypastas and horror narration, I'd come to find that there was tons of communities that included like amateur horror fiction. So I thought, what, this seems to have like the most prevalence of like content and material to work with, and people seem to have already have established that it's pretty commonplace to ask for permission to use stories or to use those stories in general. And so I kind of just like floated towards horror even though I did enjoy horror as a whole, it certainly wasn't what piqued my interest in the beginning, I don't think.
Okay, cool. Um, Eris asked, "What was your biggest challenge in starting your channel?"
You know, yeah, I guess the biggest challenge was just kind of getting visibility because, early on I had, like, you're pretty susceptible to a lot of, like, negative comments. And even today, like, if people leave me negative comments or, amidst the thousand good comments, one negative comment is always going to be what kind of sticks out to you. And so early on, I was fortunate in the fact that people were, kind enough to, like, tell me that my voice was, like, useful to them, or it's soothing, or it was good for what I was doing. So it kind of reiterated to me that I had the ability to do what it is that I was setting out to do. But the hardest part was just kind of getting that visibility within the realm of YouTube. And yeah, initially, yeah, it was just that. It was getting visibility, which basically just involved me trying to network with as many other, like, horror narration and narration type channels as I possibly could to kind of just get my name out there. And that was definitely probably the hardest part, kind of climbing uphill, but a very, very steep hill at that.
How long? Um, this is a question for me, but how long would you say it took for you to see you slowly begin to, like, gain that core audience?
Yeah. So yeah, I started the channel in 2014, and I want to say, like, it took, like, before I really started to kind of, like, find my niche and go in the and like and start to find that this was, like, within the realm of possibility of being, like, my full-time focus and job, was probably about close to 2 years maybe. um, and and I think that just came through the process of, like, trial and error. As far as, like, initially I was kind of reading Wikipedia pages, and then it became science fiction and classics, and then it eventually got into, like, the horror, the horror fiction, or the creepypastas as they call them. And, like, once the sort of niche, you know subtopic of, like, true scary stories started to pop up, I decided to kind of take the channel in that direction, as I still felt that it was, like, early enough to try it out, and it seemed like a lot of people were having success with it. And then when I had attempted it, it seemed like a lot of people were very interested in that. And so yeah, once I kind of found my footing, that was which was after about maybe 2 or so years, is whenever things really started to kind of pop off.
It's awesome. So it definitely took a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it
It
was
wasn't just
more.
overnight.
Yeah, definitely not overnight, which is something that I can say, you know, as anyone, would, just, like, struggling with that desire for, like, positive feedback, like, early on, whether you're practicing, piano, or trying to get good at a sport, or getting in shape, whatever it might be. Like, even whenever I was at 20,000 subscribers, which, to some individuals would be, like, considered a lot, there was a certain sense within me that, like, I still wasn't accomplishing what I thought I would have been able to accomplish, like, very quickly, I suppose. And I was very close to just, like, kind of stopping the channel altogether, because I don't know, there's something. Yeah, it can be very, very discouraging. But my roommate gave me a pretty good advice, in the fact that he said that every YouTube channel that he's ever observed, over a duration of time, eventually, as long as you are persistent and there is a audience for your content, you will find, you will find success as long as you stick with it.
Awesome. Alright. Pancom asks, what are your thoughts on H.P. Lovecraft's literary work? Besides the horrible racism, I'm not sure about that, but
Oh yeah, yeah. H.P. Lovecraft is amazing. I read quite a bit of his stuff on my on my channel initially before I had also kind of taken a lot of that down related to fear of copyright issues. And because I'm not really sure like who owns his works now, but I'm sure somebody has got their mitts on it. But the cool thing about Lovecraft is, yeah, he was. There's whole documentaries that just talk about like him sort of patenting, maybe not necessarily patenting, but like definitely creating a strong foundation for modern horror within the concepts of like fear of the unknown, and I think nothing really goes beyond that fear of the unknown than his works, because he focused so much on intergalactic, interdimensional beings that have existed for so long and are so large that even their mere existence, if you were to observe them, would drive you to insanity. And I've always enjoyed that about H.P. Lovecraft, is his kind of focus on things that are so terrifying, they're incomprehensible, and they drive you to madness.
Is there one specific story, not just Lovecraft in particular, but is there one creepy story that just tops the rest, that's just stuck with you for a while?
That's a tough question. I was doing some reflection on yesterday whenever I was listening. I don't know if you guys were doing a debate or I think it was the town hall meeting situation, but somebody had asked if I had read I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream, and then I remembered, I still have that on my channel, so I had like unlisted it so that they could view it. And then one of the comments that someone had left. So just to give context, the story's called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison, and from 1967. And one of the quotes, basically, I don't remember the entirety of it, but the description I have here is: we suffer eternal torment at the loathsome hands of the supercomputer, in Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. But basically, I think like a series of survivors in like a post-apocalyptic world exist within, inside of a supercomputer that, an AI that is just filled with so much hate for them that it keeps them alive, specifically just to torture them day in and day out. And one of the quotes that someone had left, this was 4 years ago, which was funny, it says, AM's hateful explanation is not included in this video, and he says, hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano-angstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant for you. Hate. And I don't know, that like something about that, like the sort of the knowledge that eventually one day we will have quite a bit of interaction with artificial intelligence, even if we might even have that currently, but just coming to the realization that artificial intelligence may get to such a level of sentience that it could potentially hate us to that degree, you know what I mean?
That's definitely a scary thing to think about.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't come true anytime soon.
Yeah.
Theo asked, this is a little off topic, but are you going to watch any of the presidential debates?
I guess so. I'm not exactly sure. Like, is there still, I know, like, to a degree, Bernard Sanders has suspended his campaign, but at the same time, he also is not technically out of the race or something of that nature.
He still has a chance at the convention, but it's more than likely that Biden.
So is that what they call like a brokered convention type scenario, or is it? Not absolutely certain, but basically, I just find it such a strange thing in the sense that the Democratic Party, just at least in its current form, seems so divided, and then the weirdest situation of all is just kind of observing the character of Joe Biden, like slowly, and almost maybe he saw some sort of Lovecraftian monster and was driven to madness or something, where he just seems like a babbling mess right now, which, is sad, but at the same time it makes for a lot of funny compilation videos and things like that. So I you know I don't anticipate, if there's like a Joe Biden Trump debate of sorts, like it, I'm just gonna approach it the same way I would approach like stand-up comedy or something like that. I don't really know.
Yeah, I can see that. Discord user asked, even though I think this is against copyright, but would you consider reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life in the YouTube video?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't read it for a YouTube video, but I really have a lot of respect for the good man Jordan Peterson. I always found his character to be so interesting to me because he had generated so much controversy around his character, but which obviously in a lot of ways brings attention to him, and that's kind of what brought his existence into my attention. And then when you kind of like dig into what he's actually saying as far as like core values and his ability, he is an amazing ability to articulate things, which is impressive. But like when you come to see what his character is, like he's so incredibly innocuous and generic that like even one of his like patented sayings of like clean your room, you know what I mean, somehow it borders on the line of controversial. And I've always found that to be very odd about him, is that the things that he talks about, obviously he has a lot more in-depth conversations about psychology, which are really interesting, but the manner in which he found himself in the center of controversy, or the center of apparently a lot of frustrations from his colleagues at various universities, that to me has always been such a baffling observation, because I feel like most of what he says, hypothetically, what he said was said in the year 2014. You know what I mean? Like even back then, I feel like most people would just kind of dismiss what he says as almost like just an annoying dad or something.
Yeah, for sure. Method wants to know what your opinions are on anime. Another off topic
Oh, an
question.
anime, yeah. I love anime. I think the cool thing about anime is that it bridges the gap between the sort of childlike wonder of animation, and at the same time, it always seems to focus on very, to varying degrees, like adult themes that, you know, I don't think children would otherwise be exposed to through, conventional like Nickelodeon cartoons or something. So I've always had a lot of respect for anime, and the fact that like there's this weird sense, or within our culture here in the United States, that like even though there's so many people that are fans of anime, but at least within like the producers that produce animation, it's like you have children's cartoons, and then everything beyond that is essentially sort of something along the lines of The Simpsons or Family Guy. I could be wrong, but so maybe they don't feel as if though American producers don't think that they could compete with anime as far as like bridging that gap between having like the serious tones of a conventional movie, but like mixed with animation. But it definitely doesn't seem as prevalent, and I wish it would be, because I feel like there's, with the amount of creative minds that exist here, in different Western societies, I would love to see their interpretation of things, that are beyond the realm of tentacled porn, or
For sure. Eris asked if you believe in any conspiracy theories.
I believe in a lot of conspiracy theories. No,
It's like
I
a few or like a main
it's I want to say that like before I espouse myself to be some sort of tinfoil hat wearing individual. I want to say that like I enjoy maybe not necessarily jumping on board something in a sort of like dogmatic sense without digging into it. I enjoy questioning, conventional narratives, and the primary reasoning being is that I like to imagine myself in a position of power, and if I look back upon the manners in which I had, achieved that position of power, I know for a fact I probably had to step on a few heads, and so in a lot of ways, whenever you're given a certain conventional narrative by, especially like a state-run entity, I don't find it too wildly far-fetched to imagine what they're telling you is usually false. So, at the very least, I like to keep the narrative in which I consume my reality, like my media that I consume. I like to keep it really wide. I want to see things on the left, I want to see things on the right, but I also want to see things on the fringe, because I think from gathering all those different perspectives, you can kind of create, to a degree, an average of what you perceive to be something that you could consider truth, even though it's hard to ever say that you'll ever have the full truth.
Awesome. Pancom asks, what are your thoughts on the new subgenre of horror, the post-horror film, especially A24 Studio?
Oh, interesting. I to be honest with you, I don't think I'm familiar with what post horror or 824 Studio is.
I looked it up quickly. It seems to be more jump scare, more actual like nightmare fueling things. Is what I'm seeing.
Okay. Huh. Um,
Maybe like a less than like a Ghost or an Insidious.
yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I definitely need to check that out, because I'm always, my one biggest frustration with the horror genre, as far as writing goes within like the creepypasta community, like obviously a lot of my stories that I read, just to kind of give a general concept of the stories that I read on my channel, a lot of them involve like stalkers or scary experiences with like real life people, and a lot of those involve, say younger women dealing with particular stalkers or weirdos and things like that. I'm sure my chat would probably agree. And then also I read a lot of paranormal things as well, maybe not quite as much, but and then you get into the realm of like creepypastas, and it seems like the reason I was such a huge fan of like science fiction was because science fiction, within its sort of core tenets, tends to focus on creating narratives that like tickle your mind, you know what I mean, and make you question hypotheticals that could exist in the future, or essentially just make you question reality to a degree where sometimes I feel that horror as a whole tends to just focus on the here and now, and like sort of like the in the moment unexplainable scares. For example, there was, I think, a Stephen King book that was made on Netflix as a movie, Into the Corn or something of that nature. But basically, this like brother and sister pull off at like a church, and as they are kind of at a rest stop there, they hear people, screaming for help in the corn. But the second that they go into the corn, it's like they're trapped in there. It's like a labyrinthian maze, but it's also like a whole nother reality. Now, eventually, there is sort of like a more logical explanation, I guess, they have for that. But to a degree, the sort of conventional approach that horror takes to things is that it's happening and you're dealing with it, kind of thing, which is fun, you know what I mean, in the sort of experiential sense. But sometimes I really enjoy science fiction because it can actually, it really goes into the depth of whether or not something can be a reality, and it helps to kind of, I feel like, tantalize that intellectual aspect of your brain a lot more than the sort of reptilian fear aspect.
I'm gonna unmute Pancom. He wanted to elaborate.
Okay.
You're unmuted.
Hey,
Hey.
hey, good talk to you. Let's read them.
Yeah.
So, some of the specific movies, I guess I would kind of say, you may have actually heard of a few of them, even if not the studio. Hereditary, Midsommar,
Oh,
Fallen
nice. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and these are movies that, like you said, kind of they don't really go for like that reptilian brain. They more so go for like the really fucking uneasy.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that those are fantastic movies. Ari Aster, the director, has kind of obviously created a name for himself there. But yeah, the one, I loved Hereditary for sure because kind of right out the gate there was a moment in which like the the mother, their mother had passed away, but she, or rather her mother, you can see her ghost in the one corner, and there's no like jump scare to it. There's no sort of like outright sense in the conventional sense that you should be afraid of it. But there was something that I felt in my heart, a certain sense of diseasiness that I would say is probably how I would react to seeing a ghost in real life, because obviously I don't think a ghost is walking around with like a big set of cymbals to like clang in your face as they scare you. It's always usually something that you sort of silently see in the night that glows or whatever, and just the sort of irregularity of it is what generates your fear. But obviously, I mean, not to spoil alerts for Hereditary if you haven't seen that yet. One of the heaviest scenes I had ever seen in a movie comes from Hereditary, and involving the youngest daughter, or the daughter in the movie, where essentially she's having like an anaphylactic reaction to consuming nuts at a party, and the older brother, who just is trying to have a good time, has to drive her to the hospital as fast as possible, and her airways closing up, and she opens the window and sticks her head out the window, I guess under the presumption that she's going to get some air that way. But as she does that, there's a pole that I think he hits something or avoids something, and he drives towards a pole. It misses the pole, but then her head being out the window essentially completely decapitates her. And just the build up from like the entire movie up until that exact moment, and then sort of the lingering sense of sadness that goes along with that. It's like it's a sense of horror that like is really unlike anything I'd ever seen, and you can't help but just like slap your hands against your head and say, "Oh my God," you know what I mean? So that was,
Yeah, it feels surreal.
it really does. And the boy's reaction to it, I mean, he essentially drives home, leaves the body in the car from what I recall, and then just goes into his room and curls up and puts a blanket over himself. And he doesn't want to tell his parents. He literally has no idea how to react to something so unbelievably traumatic.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree on movie tastes.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
All right. Let me find another question. Um, DiCaprio wants to know: do you make a living with your content creator activities?
I do, yeah. So before I had done YouTube, I was a registered nurse at a hospital, and so I was kind of just doing it as like a side scenario, just more as like a creative outlet, because I was definitely drawn towards creating things when I was younger, but I was sort of in many ways guided by my parents towards healthcare, I guess primarily due to like the sort of general job security of it. But once I got into it and kind of found my rhythm and found some success, I started to see a lot of like the monetary success on YouTube, and then slowly was creeping into my mind about the possibility of this actually being a reality. And one day once I was able to kind of surpass my income at my other job, I just made it my complete focus to make that a reality, of making it my full-time job. And since then, the nice thing, like I almost feel like in many ways like success on these kind of platforms to a degree is a little bit like kind of has a snowball effect, as far as like once you have success on here, I was able to translate and expand the content over into like podcasting, and then kind of diversify income from there and that kind of thing. So yeah, it currently is my my primary source of income.
That's awesome. It's like the dream come true.
Besides selling cocaine and things like I'm just kidding.
FBI.
Yeah.
Okay. I have two people that are asking about Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
So what do you think of Jeffrey Epstein, and who killed him?
Yeah, there's a few different theories there. I can't wholeheartedly say that I have any idea, but one of the most interesting theories that I find is what people kind of describe as like a honeypot. And, you imagine there's this sort of like lust-filled island that a bunch of powerful people are drawn to, or, the flight log. They always talk about the flight logs of Jeffrey Epstein and stuff like that, and individuals that come there, they're able to interact with other powerful people. They're able to participate in some very like, presumably, I mean, I can't say the specifics because I don't really know, other than what Jeffrey Epstein himself was, I guess, tried for back in like 2005, and then like the case reopened later or something like that. So there are specifics on what he was tried for, which is pretty scary stuff. But basically, some people were saying it's within the realm of very powerful and wealthy individuals, participating in a lot of those kinds of things aren't even necessarily from the individuals controlling it. It's not like they're giving you a gift or anything like that. It's like they're specifically placing you in a scenario in which what you're doing is so abhorrent to the populace that if they were to have that on video, they're essentially able to blackmail you in every sense, to have further, control, with as their tentacles are able to spread further to more powerful people. How one kind of like finds themselves in that scenario or on Jeffrey Epstein's island, I'm not really sure, but I've heard individuals say that like, Jeffrey Epstein and like I forget what his hand or procurer was, the Madam Giswell or Maxwell, or I forget what her name was.
Like that.
Yeah, like basically people would theorize that maybe they were part of Mossad, like the Israeli intelligence agency, and that they had created, the Israeli government had kind of like, intelligence had kind of created like a honeypot for bringing in powerful people, and then obviously having blackmail on them, and then just further control. And, I find the sort of Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself narrative so entertaining, because I feel like a lot of people don't really even, because it's permeated in a meme culture, so far, it almost, to me, being sort of conspiratory, or at least like kind of questioning whether or not something is reality, I start to wonder, I wonder if he's even dead at all, you know what I mean? Because because obviously the scenario in which that they were observing his cell, like the cameras outside of it are gone, which, might indicate that someone came in and choked him to death so that he wouldn't talk or whatever. Like people had speculated that, but there's also discussion of whether or not maybe he's was able to kind of have like a body double of sorts, and then have plastic surgery or whatever, and now he's existing on some island out in the Philippines somewhere. Who knows?
Maybe him and Tupac.
Yeah, him and Tupac are chilling. Yeah, I put that old life behind me. Now I just do freestyles.
Alright, let me find another question. Javable asks, do you have any political leanings, or would you consider yourself apolitical?
I would lie if I didn't say I have political leanings, but I think my frustration with being categorized into a sort of political party is that as of 2016, it seems as if though the culture of politics has kind of permeated so far into pop culture, and usually when things end up in pop culture, they kind of become debased into lesser conversation. So in many ways, it's like, say, you were apolitical, but becoming apolitical to certain political parties, that to them it means you're on the other side, or say you hold certain views towards one particular set of political values, or things that get pulled into that sort of kind of identity politic. All of a sudden, now you get attributed to the entirety of the hyperbolic nature that they describe on that particular political leaning. And to me, that gets pretty frustrating, because sometimes I think it kind of hinders actual discussion, and I would be lying if I didn't say, like, a lot of people that I know in real life haven't destroyed entire relationships over something as like odd as political discussion. Because to me, my frustrations with politics is that you kind of get so pulled into it, you know what I mean? Like having ideas or concepts and the manner in which you want to run society. And I definitely think that those can be manifested, or your reality within politics can definitely be manifested through honing your understanding of it, and then getting involved in whatever degree or level of politics you can. But I would say 99.9% of us most of the time are just kind of inundated with opinions, and opinions are fine, but I never really think that those opinions should destroy or divide people, because to a degree, especially lately, I come to find that people start to really, really dislike each other over political differences, when in reality, your political differences are no different than just kind of like a live action role play, you know what I mean? and I don't say that to be disrespectful. To me, it just seems like, if you can imagine, like, what if hypothetically the media decided that arguing about anime or something was what they were going to fill the TV screens with 24/7, and that was what all of a sudden the conversation was limited to, and you need to argue about whether or not you liked anime or hentai more, or what, you know what I mean? So it's just I'm not saying that those are equal by any means, obviously, but in many fashions, I feel like people tend to lose reality of what control they have over their life, and the only thing they really have control over is the manner in which they act and the way they treat other people, and getting caught up in kind of debasing someone else based on their sort of hypothetical theories in which they'd like to see the world. You can have conversations about that, but to kind of like break somebody down, to me, would just indicate that you don't really even have a grasp of your own self. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Let's bring it back to horror. Fish asked, have you recorded any classic horror stories for your channel? And if not, would you?
Yeah, I definitely do have a lot of those, but around the time that I was like pretty concerned about different copyright issues, most of those were either deleted from my channel or made private, because of fear of that, because I had friends that also within this realm, that a book company saw that he had the 3 parts of a particular H.P. Lovecraft novel on his channel, and rather than just copyright striking him one time, they copyright struck him based on all 3 of those present on his channel, which then in that scenario can really put you in a very precarious position on YouTube, because I don't know how familiar people are with the YouTube as a company's ability to like kind of make those things right or communicate with them. It can be very difficult, so I definitely have read quite a bit of like classic horror literature, Edgar Allan Poe, and H.P. Lovecraft and various others. But as of right now, most of my content just kind of sticks solely to stuff that subscribers would send in.
There was a question kind of similar. Can't find it. Yes, here it is. It's pretty similar. why do you prefer using Reddit as a horror story source? Do you feel like these stories are more down to earth?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I guess as right now, it just within this, the community of like true scary stories, it just sort of seemed to be the specific hub in which I created my niche. So like, this all kind of started with a YouTube channel by the name of like Mr. Nightmare. He is well larger than my channel, very very big channel, but he was the first to kind of do that, and a lot of his stories, rather he kind of changed up in the fact that rather than doing like amateur horror fiction, he had stuck to or tried out true scary stories from people submitting them, and that just so happened to kind of have a large grouping of individuals at Reddit. Like, it's reddit.com/r/let's not meet, is the subreddit. And basically that entire subreddit was focused around, people submitting their stories with, real life stalkers and creeps and stuff like that. So it sort of just kind of became part of the average culture, I guess, within my community and other communities to kind of submit stories there, because it was like the most accessible. So like initially I was taking a lot of stories over email, but I came to find that like it was very difficult for me to kind of like siphon through what was quality content or what was not. So a lot of the times I'll take stories that I get sent through email and put them on, or I created a subreddit so that people could like upvote and downvote what is good. And I think it just kind of like keeps everything nice and organized and consolidated there. So that's, and then whenever because I have another individual who goes to Reddit to like find stories for me and ask permission and all that whole process. So I'm definitely open to if there are other places in which to gather more stories, I definitely would be open to that. But I just come to find that Reddit's definitely the easiest.
Is there a specific subreddit that you prefer? I'm personally a fan of No Sleep. I think that one's probably the best.
Yeah. No Sleep is amazing, and I love the kind of cultural influence that it's had over things. You start to see some sort of stories along that vein of creepypastas kind of like pop up in Netflix originals and various other YouTube productions, which is super cool. But yeah, I usually stick to stories that are within the vein of Let's Not Meet, just because that seems to be what people are primarily a fan of, at least on my channel, like my niche, with scary stories that have kind of like happened to people, but don't get too far into the realm of like unbelievable, I guess you could say. But there was a story on No Sleep that really stuck with me. I forget exactly what it was, but it was about a guy who worked. He worked in an airport tower, and basically they were across from like a cornfield. And every night he would see some girl, like some like dead-looking girl in like tattered rag clothing, like sprinting across from the cornfield to, through the runway towards his tower, and then he would just like lock the door, and then she would like be sprinting up the stairs to like bang on his door to be let in. And something about like very ominous imagery, or like where it's not necessarily, it's like I said before, it's not necessarily like a jump scare, but something about like the imagery itself. Like if the imagery itself can like really like fill me with a sense of dread, I find that that's like way more effective in as a kind of horror genre than anything that's kind of just a jump scare.
Let me see. Lee Matronic asks, have you ever personally had a paranormal experience?
Not a whole lot. The only thing that's really happened to me that was strange, but to a degree, is kind of like, or at least within the sort of more scary paranormal sense, that can kind of be explained away a little bit. But I just remember in college, we lived in this town where it's like, it had the highest congregation of like millionaires back in like the 50s, but then like as the economy like turned to turned to poop like later on, the town was essentially like abandoned, and a lot of those old mansions and stuff were turned into student housing and apartments and that kind of thing. And I lived, way at the top on like the fourth floor, almost in what looked to be like an attic. And like I just remember like towards the end of my like last semester, I started to like wake up in the middle of the night and be completely paralyzed, having like an experience of like sleep paralysis, and almost feeling as if though that there's something like sitting on my chest, and I couldn't completely understand what it was that was causing that, but at the time, I don't know if it was just like exacerbated because of stress from school, but it was very kind of like a scary phenomenon to experience.
Yeah, I definitely could not handle sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
That's a scary thing to think about, especially when there's something in the corner of your. Anyway, Chanel asked, "What other YouTuber do you follow?"
Yeah, so I follow a lot of political discussion YouTubers. I suppose, aside from like listening to music and that kind of thing, I just like to listen to people talk about different politics, which I think to a degree, if as I list these names here, I don't want people to kind of get like too wrapped up in what they perceive them to be, but I just enjoy their sort of like take on things, because I feel like it's usually relatively level-headed. But listening to people like Tim Pool or Styx Hexenhammer or like Stefan Molyneux and things of that nature, I don't know. I think it to me a lot of the times it's just kind of like white noise to have in the background as I sort of get updated on what random nonsense is happening in the world. But I used to have like a very wide pool of political YouTubers that I would listen to, and I think this was kind of at the peak of sort of media hysteria post 2016. But then as like that sort of like sense of everything is crazy started to dampen down, I just kind of I've actually lately been kind of trying to get away from politics, because just kind of been overwhelmed with a sort of sense of, I wouldn't say helplessness per se, but just sort of a sense of nihilism towards whether or not my beliefs or my considerations politically even matter. You know what I mean?
DeCapre asked, "Are you afraid of using the influence you have on a part of your audience in a bad way? Also, do you think about ways to influence your audience in a positive way beyond the initial purpose of your content?"
Yeah, I definitely, I really don't, I mean, in the same fashion that, like, I hold a very strong pride in, civil liberties and individuals making their own decisions in their own life, and not controlling people. Like, I never want to come off like a dick, you know what I mean? Like, I never want to come off as if though, like, my opinions are greater than yours, or my perception of reality is somehow superior, because I know for a fact that, like, my character development as a human has changed so much that, like, what I believe now, 10 years from now, could be completely different. And I have not even realized it. So I never want to, like, be someone that is negatively associated, to my following or something like that. And the cool thing is about the horror narration community is that a lot of individuals on there are, like, super, super positive. And, they use the videos either for entertainment purposes, the excitement there, or, obviously, the sort of ASMR relaxing sense. Like, a lot of people have told me that they kind of use my stories and my voice to fall asleep, and that kind of, like, generated my tagline of, like, lulling you into beautiful nightmares, because it's sort of like a mixture of, my sort of monotone voice, contrasting the sort of terrifying experiences that people have. But basically, yeah, my goal, because I know sleep is obviously very important, and if I can help people kind of achieve a sense of relaxation or escapism with my content, I definitely want that to be the number one goal for the channel. But then also when it comes to like doing like live streams and that kind of thing, obviously I'm like recording stories, and it sticks very much to the process of hearing the stories and all of that content. But at the same time, I also try to keep it very like lighthearted and fun, and discuss in-depth things without like really ever getting too negative about anything. And I think it's cool because it definitely reflects upon the community, who whenever I go through the comments, like everybody kind of maintains that sense of positivity, and then that's also kind of reflected in my Discord as well. So that's and it's funny like coming to a Discord like this and just seeing how incredibly active it is, because I mean, you guys, even with like 6,000 people that are part of your Discord, like to even just look at it now, and or earlier, where there was like 1,300 people in there at one time, like active, I'm just like, holy cow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's being in a community like this definitely is a lot of hard work to keep people's retention.
Yeah.
I think that's why, like you post 3 videos.
Yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Yep.
I think that's a great retention rate. Definitely.
Yeah, it's been, it's kind of finding that middle ground of like putting out enough content to keep people interested, but also not doing it so much that I drive myself insane, I suppose.
Is there ever a period where you feel like you would run out of stories?
I was kind of like briefly scared, because like a friend of mine who was who gets the permission for the stories and various content, like they were saying that they noticed a decrease in the number of like posts on the different subreddits, primarily based because of like the sort of social distancing recommendations because of COVID. And I was like, well, I guess it's a good thing that people aren't having like as many scary interactions with each other in real life. But at the same time, I was like, I need something to happen here soon so I can talk about it.
I asked that because Quinn LB asked, is there something that people can do where they can submit their own story?
Yeah, for sure. So you can submit it to my email, which is letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com. But I usually prefer that people go to my subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/letsreadofficial. And kind of wish I could keep some sort of continuity with the amount of names I have for my different social media. But basically, the cool thing about the subreddit is that you can submit it there. It can be like archived for quite a while, collecting upvotes or downvotes or whatever, and then I can eventually get to it as content requires.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Jensen asks, when will you get tired of playing Overwatch?
Yeah, Overwatch. Every single day of my life, I'm tired of playing Overwatch. But I don't know what it is. I think that there's some sort of they have figured out some sort of like deep psychologically embedded nature to it that is almost like electronic heroin, where as I get bored of one character, I can switch to another, and as I get dunked on by somebody else, it brings you down just enough so you can dunk on somebody else. And Overwatch is the most fun I've had as far as a team game goes, but also like the bane of my existence.
There's a large group of us here that play it, so you're definitely welcome.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I would love to play with you guys. That'd be great.
What's your main hero?
Well, for quite a while I was a Hanzo main. As sad as that sounds, I know. But recently I feel like I've been kind of like forced to play McCree all the time, because it's like if you don't have a tracer coming at you, you've got a Doomfist, or you've got a frontline battle between two Reinhardts, and you need to like flashbang the top of their shield so you can get that secure that kill. You know what I mean? And the amount of like damage output that McCree can like consistently do with, especially with his like stun right click, is so ridiculously stupid. But with Hanzo, it's like, oh, you've got that one shot, which to me makes it way more exciting. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, I gotta like prove myself to be good. But as far as like just consistency, I'm always kind of pigeonholed into playing McCree to counter pretty much everything. Especially with everybody's rolling around as Ball, and I love Ball. Ball is so much fun. But at the same time, like as Overwatch has like gone on and they've created new heroes, I feel like Jeff Kaplan and the Overwatch team, has just kind of like lost a lot of their creativity, and obviously balance is not necessarily something they consider a whole lot, even though I know they consider it probably every day. But I don't, have you gotten to play Echo at all?
I have. She's very difficult.
Yeah,
So she will be like a main hero for most people. It's very hard to counter her.
Yeah, I've watched quite a bit of her and played a little bit, and obviously it's just weird because like she's essentially, it's like a Pharah mixed with a Tracer, everything about her is just so insane. And then obviously you can, if you have an ult, you can turn into another tank or anybody like that, get your ult like instantaneously, and all of that is like very exciting. But I definitely see some pretty big nerfs coming her way here soon, and I really hope so, because she's kind of insane. Yeah.
Okay. K-Pax asked, this is kind of like a two-part. Have you seen the movie Paris?
Oh, Parasite. I keep hearing about it, and I've heard about it for a while, but I haven't watched it yet. But I heard it was great.
I think that you would very much enjoy it. It's got the right amount of like keeping yourself on your toes to see what happens next.
Cool. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, I can't ask that question. Eris asked, why do you think there's an appeal to the horror genre to most people? What do you think about the horror genre attracts people?
Yeah, that is interesting, because it is almost like one of the most popular categories. And it's funny, I was kind of thinking about this the other day, and I realized, like, I asked somebody, because they were telling me they were watching a horror movie, and I was like, why don't they ever, like, we make all these horror movies, how come nobody ever makes like the complete polar opposite, which would be like, utter bliss and, heaven, borderline like, heavenly movies or something like that. And they were just like, oh, because it's boring, and I think the reason is because like we as humans are so attracted towards chaos and conflict that I think there's something about like the sort of insanity that exists within horror that, in a very strange, like morbid, deep evolutionary psychological sense, we're just pulled to, like moths in a flame, and because you can even notice that, within our own culture, is that when we exist in a relatively sort of peacetime sense, I think, like especially, within the political realm, I think people start to almost like generate, combative narratives amidst each other just to kind of like continue the conversation,
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, Seven asked, what do you think are the kinds of content YouTube needs the most currently?
Oh, well, as far as it needs, for me, I guess just like thought-provoking content, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not exactly sure what's at the top, tippity top right now, but, I just, like, I see stuff like Mr. Beast and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, I don't really follow a lot of like the top content, but like you can stumble across it based on like memes and who's the top people right now, but forever it was like Let's Players, and I'm sure Let's Players obviously still have a huge influence, and it obviously created Twitch streamers and things like that. But it seems as if though YouTube really promotes like the lowest possible effort with the fastest turnover as possible. As long as you can keep people's attention, that's like what's important to them. I do feel like to a degree YouTube, like many tech companies, kind of have political leanings, which so it's you kind of have to avoid getting into that realm if you want to like maintain your monetization within their platform, which is odd. But as far as what YouTube needs right now, I think like thought-provoking content that doesn't isn't heavily whitewashed in a sort of echo chamber. I think like just content that makes people, especially young people, since they're obviously the primary demographic, just stuff that makes people think. And I think thinking stuff that tickles your brain is good.
Probably less vlogging, more
Yeah.
discussing topics.
That would be cool. I do find it neat whenever like someone like what's that, like Primal Creations, or I sound like a boomer right now. It's like, he just like makes like clay huts and mud houses and stuff. Yeah, it's like something just relaxing about that, where it's like you don't hear his voice, you don't care about his dumb opinions, like he's just playing with mud and making a house, you know what I mean? Like, and it's chill.
Okay, DeCapre asks, your content is only audio. Do you think horror and fear can be conveyed all the same without the addition of images and video?
I think so. It definitely isn't. I think in many ways, the horror presentation within audio is, in many ways, like superior to like visual, horror movies, and I think primarily because it doesn't rely so heavily upon sound, or it relies so heavily upon sound, but it doesn't rely on like the jump scare sound. You know what I mean? Because I've always wondered. I was like, what is it about me that like is actually so filled with a certain sense of fear and anticipation whenever I watch like jump scare movies? And I think it's because they all kind of follow the same sort of like Pavlovian dog like scenario, where you can hear the string instruments building up, and then everything's like crittering towards your ears, and then all of a sudden it pauses and you think you're safe, and then no, there's a loud clang, you know what I mean? And it's almost as if though you're not actually afraid of the image that's presented to you, or the overall concept of the monster. It's almost like you're more afraid of what you've created in your head leading up to it, and the sort of anticipation of what's to come, in the same sense that like every time someone lifts a gun and say you're out at a shooting range or something like that, or like where they do like the 3-gun salute, like you flinch, you know what I mean? Because it almost seems as if though it's more audio based that's causing you to sort of elicit a response. But the cool thing about horror narration is that it almost relies a lot more heavily upon generating something within your mind, that sense of ominous fear. And I definitely do also rely on music quite a bit to kind of generate that atmosphere, because I have a really talented musician that I work with. His name is Iron Cthulhu Apocalypse, getting back to H.P. Lovecraft there. But basically he's a super prolific artist who makes a ton of like dark ambient stuff. And I can sound super creepy or whatever during my videos, but then the second that you add the music on top of it as another layer of fear, that I don't think you would get otherwise.
Personally, I get more freaked out when people have those microphones where you can send audio through one side of your ear. People whisper in like your left ear.
Oh yeah,
you should invest in one of those, because that is truly brings a level of creepiness.
Sort of like so you almost have like an ASMR stereo type experience where it's over here, then all of a sudden it's
Yeah. Yeah.
like a bug crawled through your brain or something. Yeah, that would be cool. I do you actually surprisingly use a stereo based microphone, and I think to a degree, like the one that I'm talking to right now isn't stereo based, but the one I use for recording is just like an H4n handy recorder, which is funny because like people are like, don't you use that to capture like outdoor sound effects and stuff? And it's like, that's true, but something about recording your voice into it like captures it in an almost like personal sense that you might not otherwise get from a conventional mic.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Quinn LB asks, what is a non-horror narration you would like to do?
Yeah. Well, I think the funny thing about my channel is that it almost like to a lot of like fans, I'm not quite sure why, but it almost like teeters on the edge of like sexual, and like so everyone always like asks, hey, do 50 Shades of Grey, do 50 Shades of Grey, and I've never actually read the book before, but I definitely think that would be a fun one to burn through.
No.
Somebody says, please don't do it. That's funny.
DJ Referee asks, what is the most fulfilling part of what you do?
I think it comes down to like the sort of personal relationships that I make with fans, like whether they're in my Discord or whether somebody tells me how much like their my narrations have helped them with like anxiety and sleep and that kind of thing, because like I don't know, it's you don't realize, like, obviously I'm creating the content under, in my mind, I'm just like under the interpretation that I'm reading these stories and people like hearing the stories. But then when people tell you that, they have a lot of chronic pain or they're feeling depressed because they're, stuck indoors all the time, and your content it kind of enables them to escape that and, be something that they can take their mind off of the real world for a while. I think that's probably the most satisfying for me as far as like a sense of fulfillment, just because I know that there's, things that I use for those purposes as well. And if I could thank the individuals that have done that or created that, I for sure would.
That's a good segue into a question from Born Villain. How do you find time to spend with your Discord with your busy uploading schedule?
Yeah, surprisingly, 3 videos a week. I guess I find myself to be like kind of like a night owl. So, most of my recording process, a lot of the times they're like involved with it, I guess, because of the live streams, and then I end up just like once in a while like jumping into the Discord after a live stream and like editing audio while I just like listen to people like banter and that kind of thing. And that's what I really have enjoyed thus far with your Discord, is just like going into a random room and then catching like two people having some in-depth discussion about like the moral dilemma of peanut butter or something, and it's so
I think that's unironically happened.
Oh yeah, that's funny. But yeah, it almost gives me like a cool sense where it's like when you're on the internet, you can kind of transpose yourself anywhere and just kind of exist, or lurk, as they say there. And I think it's really cool to just kind of be near people in that process. Almost like how cats just, they don't want to sit on your lap, but they just want to be near you, And it kind of reminds me that like one of my favorite stories that I read, and I think I still have the audio up, but like privated or whatever. So if anybody wanted to listen to it, I could DM it to them or whatever. But it's called The Library of Babel, and basically it's just like this sort of like celestial library. It doesn't outright say that, but it's sort of just this library that has like every possible book that could have ever be conceived in the span of all of time, whether it's got, just the letter A inside of it, or just, every word possible or combination therein. And it's just this, massive, endless library like stacked on it, almost like the movie, Page Master, if you've ever seen that, with, I think Macaulay Culkin's in that. That was a great movie. But there's something that, like, I kind of, joining Discord, it almost like reminds me of that sense where I can just like, it's, joining in a room thus far has almost like felt like opening like a book and like catching like two characters like engage with one another, and that's been a fun time.
I like that about Discord. Can't really find it anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely.
Megafu asks, do you have a favorite Stephen King movie?
Oh yeah, Stephen King's great. I definitely love The Shining. I haven't seen Doctor Sleep yet, but I heard.
It was very good.
Was it good?
It was
Nice.
very good.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect because the trailer was so. It seemed like it deviated from the original so much, and obviously I don't know how it couldn't, because it's like a completely different location. I wasn't sure what to expect from it, but yeah, once again, like just a movie that focuses solely not necessarily on like jump scares, but primarily on just a sense of mystery and ominous fear and imagery. I think that's where The Shining essentially shines above all of the other horror movies that I've seen, and in many ways like you're starting to see manifested again in movies like Hereditary and things like that.
I've actually not seen Hereditary yet.
Oh, nice. Oh, shoot. Okay, I've spoiled it for you then.
It's okay. Trying to find a good question. Megafu asks another question. Do you think that there's extraterrestrial life beyond Earth?
It's. I do think so. I do think so. I think there's so many different possibilities within the concept of the definitions of extraterrestrial life, but like, whether these beings are extra dimensional, almost like borderline spiritual, I think that's a possibility. I think, aliens like that are just from like the next galaxy over, or even like hidden behind a planet or something, or maybe they exist on like a Titan or a moon or something like that. It's like there's so many possibilities. It's really fascinating, but I'm almost like anticipating here in 2020. It's like we've had everything else. It's like time for the alien invasion.
Maybe that's what Corona was.
Yeah, maybe that was alien virus.
Aurora Fox asks, does it surprise you that many members of the horror community are so positive, especially considering that we are drawn to the darker, creepier aspect of life?
Yeah, I guess that initially was what kind of caught me off guard the most, because you would anticipate individuals that sort of enjoy like the macabre and the morbid to be super, I guess, just edgy or maybe even rude or something like that. But then like every one of them that I come by are that like they like the the weird Jack Skellington type things, you know what I mean? But at the same time, they maintain a really positive sense, and I guess to a degree that's primarily because the content itself is just based solely around creativity. Like you're just coming to a story and you're trying to experience it, and the only time I ever sort of see people bringing their negativity is usually when someone, maybe the author within that story, had espoused a perspective or an opinion that they disagree with. But for the most part, yeah, it is kind of surprising that everybody's so chill.
Emma Louise asks, are you proud of the Discord community that you've created?
Yeah, I definitely am. And I to a large degree hope that it continues to grow, because I would love to like manifest the amount of like just organic conversations that and relationships that are had in your Discord, because it's really cool to just know that at any moment you can come in and people are, in the midst of a very interesting conversation, or just something to be involved with. Sometimes I feel bad. I look at my Discord and see that no one's on right now, or like maybe someone's typing in general chat or something, but nobody's in like VC, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it's dead right now. You know what I mean? So I hope to emulate what you guys have there, and obviously the amount of involvement you guys have, like with the AMAs and with the debates, and you constantly keeping it updated with various things, I think is really cool.
It's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
Especially while like COVID's going on.
Yeah.
It's important for people to have things that are, community building, or just
Right.
give you a sense of being a part of something. Lexishness asked, have you seen any films by Park Chan?
Park Chen.
Park Chan Wook, Old Boy, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, etc.
Oh, I think I've seen Old Boy, to be honest, but it's been so long. I know that was that a Korean film? I forget, but like, and I think it was like primarily like action oriented, or maybe was he I forget honestly, but I do know the name Old Boy, but it's been so long.
DeCapre asked, what do you think about veganism?
Veganism, it's fine. You know what I mean? I was one of the ones who saw that documentary on Netflix or whatever. I forget what it was called, but basically it just it focused primarily around like athletes, and how like vegan athletes tended to perform a lot better and all that kind of stuff. But as the more I reflected upon like the science that they were presenting in that film, it almost to a large degree felt more like, I guess, anecdotal, you know what I mean, and how it presented its perspective. But as far as veganism goes, like I think if someone wants to make a decision to only eat those things, like my old roommate was a vegan, and he, to a degree, he was very he was almost militant about it, you know what I mean? So there was times in which I've kind of found it like where I would roll my eyes, but for the most part, like people that come at it from like an ethical perspective of maybe indirectly boycotting like slaughterhouses and things of that nature, like I can totally understand why that, where they're coming from. But then like as I'm like, oh yeah, that's so bad, like I'd say that as I'm like chomping on a burger, you know what I mean? Like, so I have no problem with them living that life, but I just don't think I did try it for a period of time, and I just couldn't maintain. And I'm actually on the kind of the opposite spectrum now, where I have been back on like the keto train. Yeah, so it's like kind of like the complete polar opposite, where I'm dipping cheese in mayonnaise and making people like vomit.
Fearless Guster at in my opinion, reading scary stories are a public service announcement. Do you feel that by reading these stories, you could actually be educating people on what not to do in certain situations?
That was something that I had not really even thought of until probably the past year, when I started seeing a lot of those comments like pop up, where they said that they were in, or maybe I got it like a comment or something like that, where they said they were in a certain circumstance earlier, and because of a lot of the sort of mantras that they heard in my stories as far as warnings go, they were able to kind of like recognize those red flags early on, and then make decisions that put them in a better position. And I'm like, to a degree, I think I'm just like reading scary stories, but I guess I'm also indirectly getting people's messages across, who are trying to advise people to be safer about how they approach things.
Yeah, for sure. Boo Rabbit asks, what's the age range of the majority of your listeners?
It seems to be between 18 to 35, from when I remember looking at the demographics, and and it seems like it's like a split down the middle where it's like 51% female, 49% male, which is interesting. Didn't expect it to.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Something to be proud of.
yeah.
Um, Megafu asks, would you ever do an audio, narrate an audiobook?
I definitely would. It's tough right now because I know how much time it takes, even just like, reading 7 stories for a video and the amount of time involved in that. But I feel like there's more of like a tangible, incentive, like initially to like get that content out. Whereas if I were to do like an audiobook, unless it was like something that I knew that I was really passionate about or that I knew was pretty popular, because there's Audible has this sort of program called ACX. So like on Audible, you can self-publish your books, but then you can also go find other like amateur narrators and pay them certain rates, or like competitive rates, I guess you could say, to read your audiobook and then have it available through Audible for sorry, I'm saying a lot of ums, but just to basically just have it so it's available to the public for cheaper, And I would definitely be down to do that. I've had people because I signed up for an ACX thing like early on, and it was neat, but the amount of time that was required to do that was pretty ridiculous, because it was like, some of the books were crazy long, and you pretty much had to devote like quite a few hours out of your day to be involved in the recording process. And even during some of my streams where I'm, BSing and narrating for 3 to 4 hours, by the end my voice is already like relatively hoarse, so I can't imagine just doing it like all day. That'd be tough.
Yeah. I like this. I hope that you have a good answer to this.
Okay.
Quinn asked, have you ever read a submission and just been like, yeah, that did not happen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, or at least my experience with the stories are in many ways like identical to how the listener is experiencing the story. Like if there's someone who is listening to it and they're like, are you freaking kidding me? You know what I mean? There's most likely a chance that I've had that same reaction, and that can probably happen quite often. But at the same time, like as I'm going through it, I'm like, well, it's content, you know what I mean? So I'm just like, let's just throw her in there and see hopefully people like it. I try not to, I don't want to end up becoming like kind of people associating like my stories with like things that are unbelievable or something. Like I still want to like seem to a large degree like I want it to be credible to people. So I would hate to like put too many of those kinds of stories in a row or something like that, or but at the same time, most of the time I'm doing my narrations just kind of like a dry read. So if something catches me off as ridiculous, I'm just like, well, I'm already knee deep in this, I better keep going.
There's a similar question from Lady, and she asked, have you ever used a story you didn't really like, but you put it in the video just to have enough material?
Yeah, I definitely would say that has happened. There's a lot of the stories, like something that was just like very anticlimactic. Like those are the ones where I like get to that point and I'm just like, or I finish the story and I have a similar reaction where I'm like, crap, that's not even scary, dude. That's like borderline like silly or humorous or just kind of like, why am I even reading it? But then. And then I just like, I like to imagine the nice subscriber who's laying in bed having a deep sleep. And I'm like, well, I guess this is gonna make the video at least an hour long to help people sleep, so I might as well throw it in there.
Yeah, I'm sure people wouldn't complain just to hear you speak. I feel like that's what a lot of people do listen to your content for.
Yeah,
But then also to be scared. It's like a mixture of both.
right.
Dio asks, do you have any recommendations for people who want to be voice actors or narrators?
Oh yeah. Well, I would say now is a tough time to jump into the horror narration community, as a lot of the way that I got to where I was is primarily based on like networking and collaborating with other narrators, and sometimes that can be very difficult to kind of generate that dialogue between other narrators, or open yourself up to that. It has been cool because, like, different people in my Discord, after having just been friends with them for a while, like, they have been inspired to start channels, or individuals that came into it who were narrators, like, they started to tell me how they started to have, like, success with it, and that gets me excited, because I'm just like, wow, that's so cool. Like, just us all kind of working together as a community have eventually been able to achieve certain goals for people. So the one thing that I say for people that are starting a YouTube channel is that they do research into it. They kind of like, they start to, like, I would suggest that they look at it like a business, like, very early on, because YouTube kind of treats your channel like a business to a degree. So, like, go into it with, like, how you're going to approach this. Are you going to do 3 videos a week? Or are you going to do a video a day? What kind of content, especially like narration, like, are you just going to read creepypastas? Are you going to read true scary stories? Because you want to be careful that you don't end up, like, splitting up your audience, because that can kind of, like, hurt your analytics, which then can hurt your growth. So, one thing that I've noticed people have been doing lately are or channels that are really blowing up, are ones that kind of, like, do documentaries into things, especially like internet type anomalies. A really cool channel that I like to watch, Nexpo, Nightmare Expo, and then another one, Blame It on Jorge, or Blame It on George, like, good friend of mine. He basically they do a lot of research into a topic, and they make sort of like video essays on different stuff, and they've determined that this is their niche, this is, like, the direction they're going with the channel. And I think the faster you can determine who you are on YouTube, the faster you can kind of establish a foundation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Alexishness asked, what was your favorite story as a child?
My favorite story? That's, I guess, a tough one, because I definitely didn't read when I was a kid, and even now I can't sit here and say that I am as much of, like, a pleasure reader as I would like to be. But I remember when I finally read The Hobbit in, like, 8th grade, I thought that was a really cool experience. Just because, I don't know, it just sort of introduced me to the world of, like, Tolkien, and the manner in which the story kind of presents itself is a lot more whimsical than Lord of the Rings. And I don't know, I just really enjoy, like, that type of, like, Elder Scrolls-esque universe, because there's just something, like, so mysterious about it, and so tangible and interesting, and yeah, just a general whimsical nature to it.
Related question, Megafu asked, what was your favorite TV show while you were a kid?
Oh yeah, well, I guess I could say for sure back in the year 2000, all the way back in the year 2000, I was a huge fan of Dragon Ball Z, and Toonami, like, would show new episodes of Dragon Ball Z, every day, pretty much. Like, as soon as I got home from school, I think Dragon Ball Z came on at, like, 4 or 5, and it was just, like, so funny how, like, religiously devoted I was to getting home to watching Dragon Ball Z, because that entire episode could be solely, just Goku powering up, you know what I mean, for the next 3 episodes. But I still stuck through with it until, waiting for them to just finally defeat Frieza and move on to the next bad guy.
Asharella asks, "Are you a Goku or a Vegeta guy?" And there's a right answer to the question.
There's always a right answer. I guess when I was younger, I had always, enjoyed Goku's kind of fun having nature to him. But now as I get older, I kind of definitely associate more with the sort of chaotic nature and pessimism of Vegeta for sure. But I love I just love that both of them are both susceptible to, at a full moon turning into a giant raging monkey. I think that's funny.
Asharella asks another question. Do you think there will ever be an actual or legitimate competitor for YouTube? And do you think that we need one?
That's a good question. I mean, at least right now, from what I hear, Twitch has, at least within the realm of, concurrent viewers and streaming, they obviously are they're not completely the same, even though YouTube is in the realm of streaming. I would say as far as competitors, it is definitely necessary. I would like to see it because there are a lot of, being a content creator on YouTube, there have been a lot of frustrations over the years that I've been part of their program. Obviously, I'm very thankful that it exists, but at the same time, it would be nice to see some competitors just to kind of create a sense of incentive for YouTube to provide a better product, And I think it's kind of a good thing because, with the existence of Twitch, it's enabled YouTube to want to emulate that, you know what I mean? So, and then that, is able to increase people's, or, content creators' revenue and all that kind of stuff, and interact with their audience more. So, yeah, I'm always a big fan of competition. I know people talk about Vimeo and BitChute and Daily Motion and all those kind of things, but at the end of the day, it seems as if though YouTube is for sure, they have the infrastructure and the servers to kind of keep up with the massive demand that they are, or that they have, and it will be great to see a competitor pop up, but for that competitor to be self-sustaining, I'm just not sure that they have the sort of backing that YouTube does with Google and the ABC company above them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In many ways, I do find it kind of strange that YouTube is able to continue to exist, because when you look at their profit margins, they always talk about how they're existing at a loss. You know what I mean? So because of the ability, the upkeep on servers and that kind of thing. So you always kind of wonder, how is it that they're able to just continue to exist with, while losing money? And I always hear that, the way that you should look at it is that Google is trying to look at YouTube as an asset of influence over time, and that eventually one day, you already have most most kids are watching YouTube rather than watching television. So that their kids, the kids are going to be, YouTube is just going to be completely phase out television. But at the same time, the unfortunate part about phasing out television is that television will eventually find its way towards YouTube. You know what I mean? Where YouTube will start favoring the big corporations and their advertising friends, and then also kind of siphoning most of that ad revenue over to those individuals, rather than kind of ever thinking that they should respect the little guy. And I think that's why a sense of competition would be good, because it might start to spread the love a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Twitch is definitely making a good name for themselves.
Yeah.
It's nice to see. I'm going to take one last question, because I do believe we have a debate tournament coming up.
Oh, cool.
And this is a good last question, I would say. From Quinn LB, they ask, what video have you done that you're most proud of?
Oh, yeah, good question. It's so silly, but and it's funny because my voice has definitely evolved over time, but the videos that I've done, like as far as documentaries go, like if you were to end up on my channel and go to the playlist, there's like a documentaries section, but then there's also like countdowns, and the documentaries are fun. But early on in my career, I made a video about like the top 23 authentic like Bigfoot footage videos, and I don't know, the fact that that video did as well as it did, and you know, and just the concept of like Bigfoot makes me laugh so much. So the fact that I, you know, was able to even be a part of something as silly as Bigfoot is, I'm just proud of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you came here.
Yeah,
for the
definitely.
AMA. And thank you to your community as well. You guys have been very nice in the chat. If you want to join our Discord server, it's just discord.gg/Calliopean Club.
Oh yeah.
And we'll also be uploading the AMA to our YouTube channel.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna link the invite to your Discord server here into the chat, so people can definitely join that. You know, to the chat, I've had a lot of fun being part of the Calliopean Club thus far, just because it's really, you know, enabled for a lot of like diverse conversation, and I love that it's you know, kept people's political perspectives really open-minded. So it's definitely not an echo chamber, which is nice.
We try.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for, you know, considering me for this, and I really appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day, and everyone, thank you for coming.
Yep. See you later. All right, chat. Well, my friends, what how did you feel about that? I think that was a fun little experience, and you guys kind of got to know me in maybe potentially different ways that would otherwise, maybe you wouldn't have been able to ask those questions. But obviously, I think every live stream is pretty much like an AMA anyways, so I'm so cordial. Thanks. But yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I hope you guys join that Discord. There's like a little bit of an application process where you just have to answer like 6 questions, and I think that's just how they weed out like trolls and that kind of thing. But basically, they're just like yes or no questions for the most part. And you know, if you guys are into like, you know, diverse topics politically or just philosophically, that's kind of what attracted me to them initially. And someone from my Discord had invited me over to that, and I'm thankful that I was able to join. So I'm just going to close out of this Discord here. The stream is going to keep going. We're actually going to be reading some repairman stories here, which is kind of hilarious. But I'm going to switch over to our screen from good old Robin. And as you know, you can submit stories, all linked down below if, to the subreddit if you so desire. And this stream should be going for another, you know, 2 or 3 hours here. Hopefully I have not exhausted my voice thus far. I just, basically what I need to do now is just set up my, my microphone, which shouldn't take me too long here, but just got to get that set up, delete the old files, create a little 10 seconds of silence. Probably shut my window so I'm not picking up car noises as they go by. Also, I hope the sound quality doesn't too bad. This is a little bit more different of a setup than I normally have for normally a different setup than I have than for my normal streams. So hopefully I don't forget anything here. I mean, I hope this music actually isn't too... Is the music too loud? We have split pea soup. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, brother. Yeah, drink some water. That's a good idea. Actually, have a bunch of water bottles over here. I'm going to grab real quick. Would you guys like a water bottle? Is anybody parched? Hydrate or dihydrate? Am I singing for you today? I don't think I can sing, to be honest. I think everything's going well, though. As far as the connection, because I know sometimes it says excellent connection. Everything's good there. The music is very quiet. You know what I'll do is I'll probably switch over to the Iron Cthulhu stuff that I normally have going. That way it takes the strain off the internet. Not that I have the worst internet ever, but sometimes it's not the greatest, and having less windows open and less streaming processes could probably be for the benefit. Let's see what the Cronus side. Oh, that one's kind of loud. Let's see here. Cursed soundtrack, Phases of Extinction. That sounds chill. Alright, I'm going to turn off the Pandora here.